What's going on, shitheads? Welcome into another episode of the mini-series we're running here over on our channel here. As you probably saw, Mike got into Antonio Gibson, some of his love, the case for him. We're going to be doing a bunch of these mini-series. As always, go down, hit the like and the subscribe button. If you get an opportunity to, we'd greatly appreciate that. Helps us out tremendously. But without further ado, we want to get into episode 2 of the mini-series. And as he kind of alluded to in the Antonio Gibson video, it's my turn to talk to you guys about Cam Akers and why all of you are absolutely sleeping on Cam Akers right now. Yeah, that's right. I'm talking to you. I'm talking right to you. You are sleeping on Cam Akers. You're way too low on him. I'm going to go through some of the points, pros, cons, objective, and some of my opinions, and let you know what I think about Cam Akers. Okay, shitheads. So you're asking yourself, how did we get here? Cam Akers is coming off the board in the 5th round of startups in the summer of 2022. Well, take a journey with me. Let's go back a full calendar year, June of 2021. Cam Akers was coming off the board in startups that summer at that point at 204 in Superflex tight end premium leagues, right? Now, in July, his ADP had peaked. He was coming off the board in the late 1st, early 2nd round. Now, he tears his Achilles in July 20th, and the community panics, right? Everybody full panics on Cam Akers. They're citing all the running backs and the ones that tore their Achilles and basically their career was over. That was it for them. They either didn't come back at all, or when they came back were so ineffective, they were rendered useless, right? Their careers were over. So the problem with this, though, was a few things. One, nobody that was on that list really had the talent of Cam Akers coming out. Number two, they were not the same young age that Cam Akers was. And 3, it had no built-in advancement of modern medicine and the fact that maybe they've gotten a lot better at the Achilles injury, the Achilles surgery, and something that they've been working on quite time and time again. I mean, go back and look at Kevin Durant, who's older than Cam Akers, came back and had a lot of success individually in his sport. Now, I know it's a different sport, but there were some things that were saying maybe this Achilles injury isn't the death sentence that everybody was giving him at the time. In August, his ADP had dipped all the way down to the 9th round in Superflex tight end premium leagues. At that point, I thought the hate had gone too far. I bought in basically everywhere. I traded away on one contender, and to be truthful, I regret it dearly. Shout out to Ty. You got me on that one, buddy. Okay, so let's go back to the Achilles tear, though. July 20th, right? So he tears his Achilles, and the Rams actually placed him on the NFI list. A little different than just the standard IR list, right? But from the beginning, when they put him on that list, McVay, the Rams, they refused to rule him out for the rest of the season. Now think about that for a second. The Dynasty community is saying his career is over. Sean McVay says his season isn't over. Once again, think about that. The Dynasty community says his career is over. Sean McVay refuses to admit that his season is over. Everyone basically assumed this is, coach speak, and the Rams just don't want to admit, the organization doesn't want to admit that Cam Akers is lost for the season, and they were going to rely on him heavily, and they didn't really have a replacement, right? That turned out to be an issue. As we remember, they ended up trading for Sony Michel kind of out of desperation. But, as it turns out, just like everybody that was drafting Cam Akers in round 1 and early round 2 of startups, Sean McVay was serious, and he saw him as a game changer just like everybody else. Cam Akers, fast forward, actually comes off the NFI list and plays in Week 17. Now, as you can see to the side of me here, there's a list of all the players who returned from an Achilles tear within either 5 months' time or in the same season. So you can see that list there and all the players that did that. So there's no list there. Now, the simple case in point, I want to make, without getting into all the upside that I believe Cam Akers has, I want to get into, if you believe the narratives and all the negative stuff that's surrounding Cam Akers, what I believe the simple case for him is that even still at that floor, we're drafting him too low. All right, so let's start with the simple case. Cam Akers plays in a really good offense. And if you don't think he's going to catch passes, which a lot of people don't for whatever reason now, but even if you don't believe that, he's going to be a primary two-down role in a really good offense, the great comparison for that last year we can look to and see is Joe Mixon. Right? Joe Mixon played in the Cincinnati Bengals offense. They basically afforded him a ton of scoring opportunities. If you look back at his whole career, what was different? He didn't do anything different last year. Carries are similar. Amount of targets and catches, similar. Really, it's the touchdowns, right? He had 13 rushing and 3 receiving touchdowns, a total of 16 touchdowns. That's actually good for RB4, both in points per game and in the season last year. And Joe Mixon didn't really have a third down role. So let's just talk about the simple case here. So let's be conservative and say you don't think he's going to get passing work. I'll get to that in a minute. But Cam Akers averaged 17 carries per game in the playoffs and averaged 2 catches per game in the playoffs, right? Basically the only time he's ever played with Matthew Stafford. That's coming off an Achilles injury in 5 months. So he hasn't played football. He wasn't even able to do a lot of conditioning and stuff other than like pool work. And he's coming out and he's getting 17 carries a game, 2 catches a game in the playoffs. That was what he averaged. Now, just keeping that as the conservative number, all right? 300 touches plus is what that's going to equate to in a top 10 offense. It's going to score. That's going to afford him a ton of scoring opportunities. Like, even if you don't think he's going to get passing work, that's going to put him on pace for 300 touches in an offense to top 10. He's going to have touchdown upside that very few have.
Mailed in my company a postcard a few weeks back requesting information on penny stocks that had huge upside potential with very little downside risk. Does that ring a bell?
So now I want to address the negative narratives in the case, in my opinion, for rare upside. So some of the negative narratives that you're going to hear, right? In the return of 2021, people are going to say his yards per carry were really, really bad. Well, it's fucking true. His yards per carry, if you go look at his yards per carry in his return, they weren't great. Now, does that mean he doesn't have pop anymore? Like, is that what we're kind of alluding to? That because he came back, first of all, we're judging the guy coming off of an Achilles injury in 5 months at yards per carry when no one else in the offense during that time really thrived in yards per carry. And if you don't think he has pop, like, let me give you some stats to tell you that that narrative is bullshit, okay? Because, 95% of his yards, let me repeat that, 95% of his yards came after contact when he came back in 2021. That's the highest mark in the NFL. Go back and watch the tape if you don't believe me, right? He had 4 explosive plays versus Arizona, and essentially his first real snap share coming back from this Achilles injury, right? One of which he laid out Budda Baker, and he had two other really good runs and 1 other unbelievable pass catch play. That's in his first game back in real action, coming off an Achilles 5 months ago. Multiple plays versus Tampa Bay, he did show burst. Really, the problem was a lot of the time he was getting boxed up and hit in the backfield or shortly after. So if you think that means that he doesn't have pop anymore, like you didn't watch the games, you're just looking at a stat box. So be careful about that. Secondly, let's get into the other negative narrative that you kind of hear out there. He doesn't really catch passes. Okay, so in 2020, right, his rookie season, he played in 14 games and he had 14 catches. So there's a narrative that he's not really a guy that's going to catch passes. All right, so let's run with this one for a second, okay? So week 1, he's coming off, and if you remember coming out of college, he had in his scouting profile, like he needed to work on his pass blocking. Something that a lot of these guys do, right? Basically, it's not that they're not capable. They need to be coached up. And that was something he needed to improve on from the beginning. So Thomas Brown, who was the running backs coach there, he made a large improvement with him. And as you can see, his snap shares as you go through the season, they're reflective of that. Week 1, he came in and was the starter. All right, now think about this too. He was the starter, didn't use anything on third down because they didn't trust him. Malcolm Brown was pretty much the person they're using for that. He only played 24 snaps, and he got 15 touches, including 1 catch. That was versus Dallas in week 1. So he was the starter, but they didn't use him in that third down role. but they gave him 15 touches and 24 snaps. Like, from the beginning, it was very clear that Sean McVay wanted to utilize him and deploy him, but it was going to take time for him to learn the pass protection thing and get the trust of the Rams, right? So, week 2, he gets the rib injury, rib cartilage, and that was nagging for him throughout the rest of the year. They used him sparingly for the rest of the season up until week 12 versus Arizona, right? So, after that point, Cam Akers basically rendered Darrell Henderson, and outside of a few snaps from here and there for Malcolm Brown, he rendered both those guys to the bench from that point on, right? So week 13, obviously, he goes out and kills it versus New England. And if you look, he also had a high ankle sprain versus the New York Jets late in the year. Missed the following week. Comes back for the last week. Didn't look great. But in the playoffs, when he went bananas, and where everybody really fell in love with Cam Akers and when his hype was at the full, he wasn't even 100%. But what you do see is that his snap share, along late in the year and especially in the playoffs where he played 96% of snaps in his final game in the playoffs. Like, he clearly earned their trust from pass protection, and that's why everybody was so excited about his pass catching upside, okay? Let's think about that now, right? He'd earned their trust for the pass catching. That's why he's coming off the board in the first and second round of startups. 5 months off an Achilles injury. When everybody said he's not going to play, he plays 81% of snaps versus Tampa Bay in his third game back. That's more than Joe Mixon played in any playoff game. That's more snap percentage higher. It's a higher snap percentage than Joe Mixon played in any playoff game last year. Aaron Jones, Derrick Henry. The only running backs that played anywhere near that type of snap percentage in the playoffs were Leonard Fournette and Austin Eckler in one game apiece. Those guys were healthy. Not saying Cam Akers wasn't healthy, but he was coming off an Achilles in record time. And he was playing him in 81% of snaps. To reference the season, only Najee Harris, Derrick Henry, and David Montgomery played over 70% of their team's snaps for the season. Like, Sean McVay was trying to utilize him in that role immediately off of his Achilles injury that he never wanted to admit that the season was over. So let's go back now. Let's revisit Akers in 2021 of July. The community was as in as you possibly could be in Cam Akers, right? We believed he was an all-purpose back. The same, and he had the same receiving work resume that everyone's talking about now as he did then. Like, we believed that he was a pass catcher, going to be the pass-catching back, the three-down back. Now it's that he only caught 14 balls as a rookie. Okay, so those conflict. Let's go back and look at it now. The running back room going into the offseason last year, Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, Jake Funk, a day 3 pick, the Funk baby, and undrafted Xavier Jones. Got some tout from a lot of people, but he was ultimately cut. Because Akers' injury happened, right, they were planning to utilize him in a huge role, and they kind of had to panic. They panicked. They ended up trading a late pick for Sony Michel. That was to try to fill some of the depth and void issues they had at the running back position at that point, right? Now, let's look at the running back room today. Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, and another day 3 pick who just broke his foot this month. He broke his foot. So you got a day 3 guy, Darrell Henderson, who we weren't worried about before, and Cam Akers. So it looks like all those are the same. The offense just upgraded to Allen Robinson at wide receiver 2, and he's going to play with the best quarterback he's ever played with in his career, in Matthew Stafford. Okay, so you got Cooper Kupp coming off an unbelievable season. He's back with Stafford. They have great rapport. You got Allen Robinson upgrade. And you got Cam Akers coming into this offense. Also remember, most of the games that Akers played in as a rookie, they came at the back half of the season at the time when McVay had completely lost faith in Jared Goff. Obviously, as you see, they did so much to go get Matthew Stafford. But at that point, if you remember, they were primarily running 12 personnel, right? Every game from week 13 on. That was actually one of the narratives, if you go back and remember last summer, that was surrounding Cooper Kupp and part of the fade around him. If they're running all this 12 personnel package, he's not going to be in the slot. We know that he thrives in the slot. He can't play in the slot with 12 personnel. Part of the reason he fell to round 7 in startups last summer. Now, with Matthew Stafford, as we know, the offense is going to be much more opened up. They're going to run a lot more 11 personnel and shotgun packages. So, also, let's not forget in 2020, when he was a rookie, That was the toughest training camp to come in that any rookie's ever faced, at least in my recollection that I've been alive for. Due to the COVID protocols, they had a lot of these virtual meetings. The entire preseason slate of games was canceled as well. So Cam Akers is coming into a situation as a rookie where they want to start him. He needs to learn how to pass protect, but he didn't really have a good preseason and training camp to do that. He had no preseason game to even get work and let them try to do that for him. So he was going to be brought along slowly in the passing game all along as far as pass protection. Then he gets hurt in week 2, right? So this is also going to be the first training camp where he's going to be able to get more comfortable with the offense, the changes with Matthew Stafford, all of that, as well as getting used to his body and becoming more healthy with that Achilles. So lastly, I want you to think about this for a second, right? Sean McVay came over in 2017. Okay, so he comes over as the head coach of the Rams in 2017. He unleashed Gurley as a bell cow in 2017. 2017 and 2018. At that point, Todd Gurley was playing over 80% and 85% of snaps most of those 2 seasons, right? If you remember his knee issues, right, the knee issues that Todd Gurley had, they wreaked havoc on him late in 18. And that season, they ended up having to deploy C.J. Anderson down the stretch, right? 2019, even after his knee was clearly not right, right? Everybody knew Todd Gurley's knee was not right. You could tell by the playoffs and his sparing use down the stretch, he's not right. Even at that point, Sean McVay utilized Todd Gurley in a bell cow role in 2019, right? Like, think about that. And then they missed the playoffs. Going into 2020 now, Todd Gurley gets cut, right? They basically cut bait. They realize they messed up with the contract. They go ahead and cut him. So going into the 2020 season, they've removed Todd Gurley, a focal point, one of the big pieces in Sean McVay's successful offense, right? What do? 2020, going into the draft, 2 months after they cut Todd Gurley, they don't have a first-round pick. If you remember, Sean McVay, he loves to trade away these first-round picks, right? So he trades away all his first. They don't have a first-round pick in this 2020 rookie draft. The second round is their first pick. What do? They draft Cam Akers, right? They draft Cam Akers essentially to be the replacement of Todd Gurley. He's a premium pick, and right now a lot of people will tell you a lot of these teams have learned not to draft running backs in the first round, and that drafting them in the second round is really the new first round. That's a very premium pick for a running back. They drafted Cam Akers with the idea of utilizing him in this Todd Gurley role. So then you go back to the whole pass protection earlier as a rookie with the rib injury. It took Cam Akers a while for it to come to fruition, but as we saw down the stretch, the workload increased in 2020 where he was getting the pass pro work. He was running the ball really effectively. All the things that we loved about him as a prospect, they were coming to fruition on the football field, and he went bananas in the playoffs. I mean, he had unbelievable week versus Seattle and versus Green Bay, right? They ended up beating Seattle. If you remember, they didn't even start Jared Goff. Walford got hurt. They had to bring Jared Goff back in. Akers basically almost single-handedly on offense led them to a victory versus Seattle that game. It's crazy when you think about it. So now let's go back and let's do all this again. Let's run through all the points. The RB room, the situation is the exact same. Offense, same if not better, right? He showed in the playoffs in both 2020 and in 2021 that McVay really wants to utilize him as a bell cow. He had 81% of snaps in a game where he fumbled twice and almost cost the team the game. And now pretty much everybody doesn't believe that he can really do this in a season which is going to be healthier than he was in the playoffs. Like, do you honestly believe that 2 fumbles is going to be the reason that Sean McVay starts utilizing him the way that he's always wanted to? Do you think that 2 fumbles in that game is going to basically remove the way he wants to utilize him from the beginning? I don't think so, man. I don't think so. If you're being honest with yourself, shitheads, that's not the case, more than likely. Now, once again, even if I stick with just the narratives of all these negative stuff, he isn't going to catch the passes, and that you don't believe that he's got this yards per carry from last year, right? But if he's going to get 300 touches, even if we stick with all those negative narratives, if you think he's going to get 300 touches in a high-powered offense, he's got Joe Level Mixon upside, right? And like I've just kind of alluded to here, if he's utilized as more, which McVay's wanted to do this entire time, he has rare upside that not that many possess. So when I think about all that, and you should be too, right? When you think about all that, his startup ADP is fucking criminal. Like, he's coming off the board in the 5th round at RB15, behind Nick Chubb, behind Travis Etienne, behind Derrick Henry, behind Saquon Barkley, behind Joe Mixon, behind Dalvin Cook, behind Eckler. So Etienne's in the 4th, Henry's in the 4th, Barkley's in the 4th, Cook's in the 3rd, Mixon's in the 3rd, and Mixon and Eckler in the early 3rd, right? Personally, I have him ranked, and I'm taking him ahead of all those guys in Dynasty. Cam Akers is 23, and of all those offenses, you could argue that the Rams are going to have the best. And if they're not the best, they're certainly in line with any of those other offenses as far as scoring opportunities. So, one, what I would be doing if you have any of the aforementioned backs of Nick Chubb, Travis Etienne, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler, like, I'd be trying to go trade those pieces for Cam Akers, and probably right now you can get a plus, right? So you trade down and get a plus with Cam Akers. If you don't get the plus, for me personally, I'm very in on all the things I just alluded to that with Cam Akers. I just traded him straight up for Joe Mixon in the big Destination Devy Heisman auction league. So if you have to make a straight up trade and you believe in Cam Akers, now I think is the time, because once the season starts, I don't believe that's going to happen. So that's what I have to say on Cam Akers. I'm very fucking bullish on Cam Akers, as you can tell. So let me know what you think about the video. Let me know what you think about Cam Akers, whether I'm right, where I'm wrong, if any of this changed your opinion on Cam Akers.